Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this video lesson about the French Revolution. This is part one of 4 video lessons, so hold on to your hats, and here we go. All right, so I want to start out with a quote, actually a couple of different quotes about the French Revolution that I think are pretty pertinent. And this is from Oscar Wilde, an important Victorian-era author that we're going to learn about later on. So the only thing that one really knows about human nature is that it changes. Change is the one quality we can predicate of it. The systems that fail are those that rely on the permanency of human nature and not on its growth and development. The error of Louis XIV was that he thought human nature would always be the same. The result of his error was the French Revolution. It was an admirable result. Interesting. Quotes that discuss human nature I always find fascinating. You should too. Not just because I think of it, because, hey, it's history. We study human nature. All right. Here's one by Charles Caleb Colton. The consequences of things are not always proportionate to the apparent magnitude of those events that have produced them. Thus, the American Revolution, from which little was expected, produced much. But the French Revolution, from which much was expected, produced little. All right, so key topics we're going to talk about in this PowerPoint. Beginnings of the Revolutionary Era, we're going to talk about the American Revolution because that really was a precursor to the French Revolution in 1789. We're going to look at the background of the French Revolution itself, and the age of Napoleon. This is what we're going to be talking about in all of these video lessons. So hold on to your hats, and here we go. All right, so key topics in this specific PowerPoint, right? The American Revolution, we're going to look at how the new nation was formed, what that impact on Europe was. We're going to look at the background. We're going to take a closer look at the social structure of France, the first, second, and third estates, and then also the problems facing the monarchy. So that's the focus of this PowerPoint, the American Revolution itself and the background to the French Revolution. All right, so the American Revolution, I'm going to move my video guy here up a little bit. There we go. So Great Britain was the greatest colonial power in the world. So when the Americans decided they were going to take on the British, everybody was like, are you crazy? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, you're about to take on the most powerful military, the most powerful empire in the world, and you're like a bunch of ragtag colonists with some pitchforks and some, like old school muskets. This is not going to go well for you. Nobody thought this was going to work. But why did this happen in the first place? So they abused the colonists in the New World. They demanded massive taxes. They reneged on all their promises, and they removed certain rights that other British citizens had. But the American colonists by the British were not really considered to be British. They were like considered these people over there that exist solely to enrich the mother country. Welcome to mercantilism, right? So France jumped in on the side of the colonists, not because it was for no altruistic reason. It wasn't because, oh yes, we're going to fight for freedom. No, it's because we want to stick it to the Brits. Stick it to the Brits. That was their goal. They wanted to stick it to the British. So they're like, what better way to stick it to the British than help the Americans in their revolution? So they supplied arms and they supplied money. They supplied manpower and commanders of military experience, probably the most well-known of whom was Lafayette. The Treaty of Paris in 1783 actually ended the war. But the amazing thing about the American Revolution is that it started, it was kind of a trigger for many, many revolutions that would follow. The American Revolution really set the stage for the next century. All right, so forming the new nation. Let me move my video guy down a little bit. There we go. All right, so they established the Articles of Confederation in 1781, which was a confederal system of government. Basically, a confederal system of government is a league of loosely connected independent states. That's with the European Union. That's a confederal system of government. They lacked a strong central government, which made governing very difficult, and it was extremely ineffective. So they had a constitutional, at first they just had a convention to get together and say, okay, listen, we got to reevaluate this. We got to find out what's happening. And over the course of that discussion, they determined that, this article, the AFC, the Articles of Confederation, are not working. We got to scrap them. And so that's when they started forming the Constitution, which was ratified in 1788. It established 3 branches of government. So you have separation of powers. You have checks and balances, where each branch of government had the power to check and balance the other, and each branch had separate and individual powers that were distinct from the other branches. It was a system of federalism, which is a division of power power between one national government and several state governments, and there was a Bill of Rights, which are the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, that specified certain rights. It was including but not limited to kind of an attitude, but they wanted to make real sure that the central government wasn't going to abuse its power. So they laid out specifics like freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of religion, no quartering of troops, right to bear arms, things like that. The Constitution was actually narrowly approved. This was not, a lot of Americans are like, oh, well, of course. They look at it as like this, you know, it was always going to happen and there was no doubt. There was a lot of doubt. There were fistfights on the floor of the convention. You know, this was a very hard-fought battle, and it was very narrowly ratified. All right, impact on Europe. Huge, colossal, like, whoa. Big year, 1789, huge year. So the American Revolution, what made it so significant for our purposes is right here. It proved that the political philosophy of Enlightenment thinkers was viable. This was political theory. Everything that the Enlightenment guys talked about in terms of government was all theory until the Americans actually put it into practice and proved it could work. Proved this could, self-government was possible. Not only possible, but it was working. Right? So the French Revolution piggybacked on those ideas. They loved the idea of popular sovereignty. We're going to examine that closer later on. The rights of man, ideals of liberty and equality, freedom of thought, religion, and press. These were big ideas that the French Revolution really took from the American and said, yeah, we like that. Let's do that. Marquis de Lafayette, he was a friend to George Washington. Like I mentioned him earlier, he was the guy that came over and really got the army in shape. He was also a member of the Society of 30. This society of I would say more elite folks, it helped spark the French Revolution. They helped get the ideas going. 1789 was the year the French Revolution started. All right, so very important. All right, so Society of 30, let me move this guy up a little bit. It was comprised of members of all the Paris salons. So again, we're getting a lot of influence of the Enlightenment here. Huge influence from the Enlightenment. Now, you should know what salons are and what their significance was. I'm not going to explain that. You should know that. If you don't, you need to walk yourself back to my Enlightenment video lesson and go take a look. They were lovers of liberty. They were obsessed with ideas that embodied the American Revolution. So I want to pause here for a second and take a look at this concept of popular sovereignty, but also this idea of the individual liberties and this idea of republicanism, which we're going to take a look at also. So we're going to go to our lovely little website here. Thinking about it. Don't you love it when technology does not work? I'm going to pause the video. Hold that thought. Okay, welcome back. And now you see, or you should see on your screen, Okay, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Now we are discussing the concept of popular sovereignty. Okay, so the modern meaning of sovereignty itself, which you see right here, is the supreme authority in a political community, right? The supreme authority in a political community. That's the meaning of sovereignty. Now, the origin of popular sovereignty is somewhat different, and you need to go back and look at these three guys, all right? Because it's associated with the social contract theory, the theory of social contract. We should be familiar with at least Locke and Rousseau. I'm going to talk about Hobbes a little bit, but just to give you a little refresher, social contract is the idea that the nature of society, whatever its origins, was a contractual agreement between its members. The reason men entered society was to protect themselves against the dangers of the state of nature. All right, that's the basic breakdown of social contract theory. Hobbes is right here, right? And he said that the entity that was sovereign was an individual or a group of individuals that society named, and this would be permanent. This would exist all the time. They would have absolute power, and every single citizen would owe them absolute obedience. Welcome to absolutism, okay? Now, he was against divine right, but other aspects, Hobbes was all about strong monarchy. He thought absolutism was good times with the exception of the divine right aspect. He believed that popular sovereignty existed only momentarily. Now, Locke is where, Locke is where the American Revolution, the American tradition comes from, all right? Now, he believed it was permanent, but the legislative branch was the only one that was empowered to actually legislate for the public good. Plus, if that trust was violated, hasta la bye-bye, bye-bye. You do bye-bye. All right, so the people had the right to overthrow their own government if that government was acting in a tyrannical manner, right? And that was not something that Hobbes was about, because he said before absolute power. He clearly did not intend popular intervention to be commonplace. All right. Now, Locke didn't mean that it should be done for light and transient reasons, but if people are if their rights are being violated, they have a right to overthrow their own government. Rousseau, that's the French revolutionaries took after Rousseau in this sense. So he claimed, this is Rousseau right here, he claimed that laws enacted by the legislature could only address the common good of society's members, and they could only extend those same rights or obligations to all citizens. He did not elaborate or specify what would happen if those conditions were violated, but he did propose mechanisms to find out what the general will was. That was his idea, the idea of the general will, the common the common wills of all members of society put together into one will, right? Very democratic, not very Republican. Okay, and he did see the legislative powers as vested in the people themselves. So there is that. Now, I want you to understand the key concept of popular sovereignty as it is now. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit. A modern updated definition includes these things, right? So people have the ability to adopt their own basic law or constitution, and they can propose and amend this basic law, the Constitution. Power is vested in the people. If the people have these powers, it may institute any other changes it desires. If it doesn't, it is unclear how it can be legitimately said that government rests on the supreme authority of the people. So when we're talking about popular sovereignty, we're meaning the people get to determine their own destiny. The people get to direct their own lives. They get to direct their own government. That government authority, political authority, stems from the people themselves. So Locke had a more literal interpretation of this in terms of individualism. He was much more about the individual, whereas Rousseau was more about the community. So as we move into other isms down the line, you will see how communism and socialism take after Rousseau's school, but the American tradition strongly rests in Locke's school of thought. So now I want to shift over to republicanism, as I said that we would. So here, this article talks about two terms. There's two, let me scroll up a little bit here. So there are two different but closely related. So the first item of republicanism is a loose tradition or family of writers in Western political thought. All right, you're looking at Machiavelli, you're looking at Montesquieu, you're looking at Blackstone, and on the American side, you're looking at Madison and Jefferson, right? So these people emphasize some key ideas. They emphasize the importance of civic virtue and political participation. They talk about the dangers of corruption, benefits of a mixed constitution, and the rule of law. Okay, now when we scroll down a little bit further, the second version or the second type that we're dealing with here is, let me find it. It's a second term, sense of the term republicanism. In contemporary political theory and philosophy, it most often refers to specific and still contested interpretations of the classical Republican tradition. So what does that mean? What that means is the paramount Republican virtue is political liberty, all right, and freedom from arbitrary power. Non-domination or independence from arbitrary power. That's the operative term here, okay? So republicanism, if we have a republican system of government, people are free to determine their own destinies, and they are free from arbitrary government control of their lives, which means if government starts to enact that, they have the right to say, get out, hasta la bye-bye, we're done with you. So those are the key ideas there. Let me come back to the PowerPoint. All right. All right, so important works. Declaration of Independence, okay? I'm going to run out of time before I cover all these documents, but I want you to read this to yourself and think about what we just discussed, the ideas of republicanism, and how you see that in the Declaration of Independence, in the Declaration of the Rights of Man. So you should pause the video and read these things. And I want you to have a sense of where you see these values exemplified in these documents. Pause the video, read it through on your own. All right, so big picture. Impact on Europe, significance. In general, in the short run, the American Revolution was very significant. In the long run, it wasn't as significant as the French Revolution. Although it sparked the French Revolution was far more influential in terms of the development of European history. It did inspire the love of liberty and a spirit of revolution. There were very different circumstances surrounding both revolutions, which we'll talk about in a later video lesson. It contained different players, there were varying motives, and a very different level of violence. So, general significance of the French Revolution, and you're going to see each of these show up in subsequent video lessons in more detail. It was more complex, it was more violent, it was more radical. new political and social orders, and more subsequent revolutions follow the French model, not the American. This, unfortunately, might explain why subsequent revolutions tended to not be successful, because the French model was not successful. Thus endeth part 1. I will see you guys in part 2.